A little girl stared through a bakery window, like it was a miracle she wasn't allowed to touch. Her mother's voice shook. "Not today, sweetheart." A billionaire overheard, then made one choice that changed everything. But when a life-changing offer threatened to pull him away, he had to decide what he'd truly built. The bakery window glowed like a small sun trapped behind glass golden loaves, lined like trophies, cinnamon rolls shining under heat lamps. Cakes iced so perfectly, they looked unreal. Maren stopped anyway. Not because she could afford it, because her body forgot for a second that it was allowed to want. Beside her, Elsie stood very still. Not tantrum still, not whining still. The kind of stillness a child learns when she's trying to be easy. Her blue eyes stayed on a tray of warm bread like it was a storybook she couldn't open. The smell hit Maren next fresh butter coffee sugar, and her throat tightened in that familiar way, the way it did when she had to pretend she wasn't scared. Elsie's voice came soft, careful. "Mom, I'm really hungry." Maren's hand instinctively found her purse strap empty weight, empty sound. She crouched, palms resting on Elsie's shoulders like she could hold the world steady. "I know, baby." She swallowed the words she didn't want to say. "I don't have money right now." Elsie didn't cry. She just bit her lower lip, tiny, determined, and nodded like she was the adult. "It's okay. We can eat later." Later. Maren almost laughed at the cruelty of that word. Their apartment had a clean counter and a quiet fridge and a cupboard that echoed when you opened it. She stood, took Elsie's hand, and they started walking, shoes, damp wind, sharp streetlights blinking awake too early. Across the street, a man in a navy coat paused mid-step. Callum Sutter had just left a meeting. The city usually slid past him as background noise, deadlines, designs, numbers, steel. But something snagged his attention, a mother kneeling on the sidewalk with the face of someone trying not to fall apart, and a little girl staring at bread like it was a miracle. Callum knew that look. Not pity, recognition. A quiet kind of struggle that doesn't ask for applause. He crossed the street before he could talk himself out of it. Maren felt him before she saw him, footsteps stopping too close. Her shoulders tightened. Elsie shifted behind her leg, peeking out. "Excuse me," the man said. Maren turned slowly, already braced for the usual lecture. A question, a judgment disguised as concern. But he didn't crowd her, didn't stare, didn't perform kindness like a spotlight. He just held his hands, visible, empty, calm. "I'm sorry to bother you," he began, voice steady. "I overheard you at the bakery." Maren's pride rose like armor. "We're fine." She hated how quickly she said it, too sharp, too fast, like the words could build a wall. The man nodded, as if he understood the wall completely. "I know this is strange," he said. "A random person offering food, but I'm not asking for anything. If you'd let me, I'd like to buy you both something to eat." Maren's stomach twisted. Charity tasted like shame. She opened her mouth to refuse, and Elsie tugged her sleeve with a whisper that didn't sound like manipulation. It sounded like truth. "Mom, I'm really, really hungry." The sentence landed like a bell in Maren's chest. Not dramatic, not loud, just undeniable. The man's eyes flicked to Elsie, gentle, respectful, and back to Maren. "No pressure," he said. "If you say no, I'll walk away. I just couldn't keep walking." Maren looked at the bakery window again. Warm bread. Warm light. A warmth she couldn't provide today. She hated the choice because it wasn't a choice. "All right," she said, voice low. "Something simple." The man exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. "Thank you." He stepped aside and opened the door first, letting them enter ahead of him. Inside, the heat wrapped around Maren's skin like forgiveness. Elsie's eyes went wide, shelves of bread, a glass case of cakes, steam rising from cups in strangers' hands. Callum pointed to a table by the window. "Pick a seat. I'll order." Maren tried to speak carefully. Just bread as Elsie beat her to it, shy and hopeful. Can I have bread with butter? And milk? Callum's mouth softened into a real smile. You can have what you want? And if you want a slice of chocolate cake? Elsie looked at her mom first, asking permission without words. Maren nodded, throat tight. You can. And for the first time that day, Elsie looked like a child again. Callum returned with a tray that looked like too much bread, butter, milk juice, a slice of cake, and a small box for later. Maren's instinct was to protest. He spoke before she could. It's easier to pick a variety. No pressure to finish. Elsie didn't wait. She tore a warm piece of bread, spread butter with the seriousness of a tiny chef, and took one bite. Her eyes closed. Not for drama, for relief. Maren watched it happen and felt something break open inside her, love and guilt braided so tight it almost hurt. She ate slowly, pretending she wasn't starving, pretending her hands weren't shaking. Across from them, Callum held a coffee untouched, like he wasn't here for the food. Thank you, Maren said finally. You really didn't have to. I know, he replied. I wanted to. Elsie looked up, chocolate on the corner of her mouth, curiosity fearless. Are you rich? Maren flinched. Elsie. Callum chuckled, not offended. I guess I'm lucky, he said. I do well. What do you do? Elsie asked, instantly fascinated. I'm an architect, he said. I design buildings. Elsie's eyes widened like he'd said he built castles. Like tiny drawings that turn into real houses. Callum blinked, impressed. Exactly like that. Maren's discomfort grew in the quiet spaces. Kindness always came with strings. Life taught her that. Callum noticed. He didn't lean in. He didn't pry. I'm sorry if this feels intrusive, he said gently. You don't have to explain anything. Maren's voice came out honest, flat. I don't like owing people. I understand, he said simply. Silence stretched, comfortable for him, painful for her. Then quietly, do you live near here? Maren hesitated. We're starting over. Starting over is hard, he said, no judgment. Do you have support? Maren shook her head. No parents, no family nearby. She did not mention Elsie's father. Some absences didn't deserve airtime. Callum's gaze didn't turn pitying. It turned respectful. You're doing a good job, he said softly. Maren almost snapped back. Don't praise me, you don't know me. But Elsie leaned sleepily into her shoulder, full for the first time in too long, and Maren didn't have the strength to fight every kindness. When the plates were cleared, Callum paid without theater, no big gestures, no lingering gaze. Outside, winter air hit Maren's face like reality returning. Callum paused on the sidewalk and held out a simple business card. Callum Sutter, Studio Architecture. Maren stared at it like it might burn her. If you want, he said, come by my office. I could use help scheduling files calls. You could bring Elsie. Maren's mind rushed ahead to the obvious trap. Nothing is free, people don't do this. Why, she asked, and hated how small her voice sounded. Why help us? Callum didn't pretend it was destiny. He didn't claim to be a hero. Because I can, he said, and because I recognized something in you. You're trying. Hard. Maren held the card with careful fingers. I'll think about it. No pressure, he said immediately. If you show up, great. If not, that's okay too. Elsie lifted a sleepy hand. Bye, Mr. Callum. He waved back like it mattered. Bye, Elsie. As he walked away, Maren stood there with her daughter's hand in one palm and a fragile possibility in the other. Hope was dangerous, but so was refusing it when you were drowning. Maren kept the card for 3 days. Not in her wallet at first, too close, too tempting. She tucked it into a book, then moved it to a drawer, then back into her purse like it had a magnet. Every hour her mind gave her reasons not to go. He'll forget you. He'll change his mind. He'll expect something. It'll be embarrassing. On the third day, Elsie asked, "Are we going to see the nice architect again?" Maren looked at her daughter, clean clothes, calm face, eyes that didn't ask for much. "I don't know," Maren lied, but she did know. Because the fridge was still mostly quiet. Because starting over required doors to open. Because Elsie deserved more than survival. They took the bus downtown. Glass buildings, busy sidewalks, people who looked like they'd never counted coins in a grocery aisle. Maren adjusted Elsie's scarf, straightened her own coat, and felt her heart thump against her ribs like it was trying to run away. The directory in the lobby read, "Sutter Studio Floor, 14 elevator doors closed." Elsie sat on the polished floor like it was a game. Maren whispered, "Stand up, honey." Elsie smiled. "This place feels like a movie." Maren didn't answer. She was too busy praying her pride wouldn't ruin this. On the 14th floor, they found a frosted glass door with clean lettering. Sutter Studio. Maren knocked once, then twice. A voice called, "Come in." And the door opened on sunlight models, drafting tables, an entire world built out of precision. Elsie gasped, like she'd walked into a tiny kingdom. Callum looked up from his desk. Rolled sleeves, reading glasses. A man who lived inside deadlines. When he saw them, his face changed, genuine surprise, like he hadn't expected Hope to be brave enough to show up. "You came," he said, standing quickly. "I almost didn't," Maren admitted. Elsie drifted to the shelves, rows of scale models behind glass. Miniature buildings with tiny balconies and windows. Callum crouched beside her, careful and patient. "You like these? It's like a little town," Elsie whispered, reverent. "That's what it is," Callum said. "We build it small first, so we can build it big later." Elsie's eyes snapped to him. "So it's real someday." "It becomes real," he said. "If we do the math right, if we're careful." Maren stayed near the door, hands clasped, tension in her posture like a wire pulled tight. Callum turned to her, respectful. "Water, coffee?" "No thank you," she said. "About the job, were you serious?" "Completely," he said. "Sit. Let's talk properly." He pulled a chair away from the desk, so they sat facing each other like equals, not like a desperate mother begging. "I don't know architecture," Maren began quickly. "I'm a receptionist, scheduling organization phones. That's exactly what I need." Callum said, immediate and sincere. He explained a small studio, a part-time admin, too many moving pieces. He needed someone steady. Maren hesitated. "And Elsie?" "You meant it. She can come." Callum nodded. "I can clear a corner room, a small table, coloring books, safe, quiet." Maren's chest tightened, too kind again. "Salary?" she asked, bracing for disappointment. Callum named a number that made her blink. It wasn't fantasy money. It was survival money. Rent and groceries money. New shoes money. Maren's voice cracked despite her effort. "That's more than I made before." "Then it's fair," Callum said. Her eyes searched his face for a catch. There wasn't one. Only a man choosing to be decent in a world that often wasn't. "When would I start?" she asked. Callum smiled relief and something warmer. "Today, if you want." Maren inhaled. Faith felt like stepping off a cliff. "Today," she said. Maren moved through the office like everything was fragile glass. Callum showed her file systems, paper folders, digital folders, project calendars. He didn't speak down to her. He didn't rush. Elsie sat in the side room with paper and crayons Callum found in a supply drawer, humming softly while she drew tiny houses. At lunch, Callum opened the studio fridge. "I have leftover pizza. Too much. It'll go bad." Maren's reflex was a hard no, but it wasn't charity if it was waste, and Elsie's eyes lit up like fireworks. "Pizza," Elsie whispered. Maren gave in carefully. "Okay, one slice." They ate at a small table in the kitchenette. Elsie showed Callum her drawings. He didn't give generic praise. He pointed to details. "This window placement is smart. he said. You made it balanced. Elsie sat up straighter. Balanced means it won't fall, exactly, Callum said. Maren watched them, confused by how quickly Elsie felt safe. Children were honest. If Elsie trusted him, it meant Callum's kindness had weight. Still, Maren kept her guard up. She worked hard, took notes, asked questions only when needed, and something strange happened. She didn't just follow Callum's system, she improved it. Color-coded folders, cleaner calendar blocks, a smoother workflow. At the end of the day, Callum paused at her desk. You're good at this. Maren's reply was quiet. I like order. Callum nodded like he understood that order was sometimes the only thing you could control. Outside the city was gray and cold. Inside, for the first time in months, Maren felt useful. Not pitied. Not rescued. Useful. Days turned into routine. Maren arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, Elsie beside her with a small backpack and a careful smile. Callum was always there, first coffee already brewing. He cleared the materials room like he promised, moved shelves, set up a kid-sized table, brought coloring books, safe scissors, washable markers. Elsie treated it like her own little studio. Maren watched her daughter bloom in tiny increments. More humming, more questions, more laughter that didn't sound forced. In the main office, Maren became essential. She learned every client, every deadline, every quiet preference Callum had, like how he hated meetings stacked back to back, how he needed 10 minutes of silence after a difficult call. One afternoon, Maren found Callum kneeling by a model with Elsie. See these columns, he explained. They hold everything up, like bones. Elsie frowned thoughtfully. So if you take one away, the whole thing gets sad. Callum paused, surprised by the wording. It can collapse, he said gently. That's why we're careful. Maren smiled before she could stop herself. Callum looked up, caught the smile, and didn't tease her for it. He just smiled back, soft. That night, after Elsie fell asleep, Maren stared at the business card still in her wallet. She thought, if something good shows up, do you hold it, or do you run before it can leave? It happened quietly, like most emergencies do. Mid-afternoon. The studio was calm, rain tapping the windows. Elsie didn't come out of her room to show a drawing. That alone made Maren's skin go cold. She found Elsie curled on the small sofa in the kitchenette, eyes half-closed, cheeks flushed. Baby Maren knelt, touched her forehead. Hot. Elsie whispered, I'm cold. Maren's heart snapped into panic, old memories, hospital lights, that helpless feeling. Callum, she called, trying to sound calm and failing. He appeared instantly. What's wrong, fever, Maren said. Hi. Callum didn't argue, didn't delay. Let's go, now. Maren lifted Elsie. She felt heavier than a 6-year-old should feel, limp with exhaustion. Callum grabbed keys, coat, wallet. I'll drive. At urgent care, the lobby was crowded but orderly. Maren filled forms with shaking hands. Callum spoke quietly to the receptionist, firm, respectful, and paid the deposit without making Maren beg for it. A nurse brought them back quickly. Temperature 103.9. Maren held Elsie's hand while the doctor examined her. It looks like a viral infection, the doctor said calmly. We'll run basic tests to be safe, but she's stable. We'll bring the fever down and observe. Maren swallowed. She'll be okay, she will, the doctor said. We'll take good care of her. Elsie got medicine fluids and fell into a restless sleep. Maren sat beside her like a guard at a tiny castle gate. Callum stayed near the door, then pulled up a chair and sat down without asking. You can go, Maren whispered. I'm not going, Callum replied, simple and final. And Maren realized something terrifying. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone in the emergency room. Hours stretched. Elsie slept, breathing steadier. The fever lowered. The room hummed with hospital sounds, quiet footsteps, distant conversations, the soft beep of monitors. Callum returned with sandwiches and water. He didn't push. He just placed them near Maren like an anchor. "Eat something," he said gently. For her. Maren ate because she knew he was right. In the quiet words slipped out, "Truth has a way of escaping when you're exhausted." "She's all I have," Maren said, barely audible. Callum's gaze stayed on Elsie, not judging Maren for the confession. Maren continued about losing her parents young, about scholarships and dreams, about a life that narrowed into survival. Callum listened like it mattered. When Maren's voice cracked, he didn't rush to fix her. He just stayed. Near 10 p.m., the doctor returned with results viral, no complications. Go home with medicine fluids, rest. Maren's knees almost buckled with relief. Elsie opened her eyes, groggy. "Mom, I'm here," Maren said, smoothing her hair. "We're going home." Elsie squinted, then smiled faintly. "Did Callum come too?" Callum leaned in. "I did. You gave us a scare, kiddo." Elsie whispered, "Sorry." "No apologies," Callum said softly. "Just get better." He drove them home, carried Elsie up the stairs, and didn't comment on the small apartment, only noticed the cleanliness, the drawings taped like art, the effort. At the door, he paused. "Text me updates. Anytime." Maren nodded, throat tight. "Thank you." Callum gave a small, sincere smile. "Good night, Maren." When he left, Maren locked the door and lay beside Elsie, awake all night, checking her temperature, listening to every breath. But the fear had changed shape. It wasn't only fear anymore. It was the terrifying beginning of trust. Callum called every day. Not dramatic calls, not "I'm your savior" calls. Simple. "How's Elsie's fever? Did she eat? Do you need anything dropped off?" Maren kept refusing offers like it was her job, but Callum learned how to help without wounding her pride. One day he texted, "I accidentally ordered too many groceries. If I bring soup, it saves me wasting it." Maren stared at the message and almost laughed. He was giving her dignity as a gift. By day 5, Elsie bounced around the apartment, complaining she was bored, which was the clearest sign she was recovering. Callum called. "Are you free tomorrow? Coffee? Not about work. Just talk." Maren hesitated. "Why? Because I'd like to know you," he said simply. "Only if you want," Elsie yelled in the background. "Is it the place with Coco?" Callum laughed softly. "Yes, that place." Maren surprised herself by saying yes. The next day, she put on lipstick for the first time in months, then told herself she was ridiculous. It was coffee, not a date. Still, she tied her hair neatly, fixed Elsie's scarf, tried to look like a person who belonged in bright cafes. At the coffee shop, Elsie ran to a toy corner. Callum waited at a small table by the window. He didn't stare at Maren's coat, didn't pity the worn edges. He just said, "You both look better." They talked lightly, first projects, whether Elsie's drawings. Then Callum asked quietly, "You mentioned college once. What did you want to study?" Maren stirred her coffee eyes on the dark swirl. "Education. I wanted to teach." Callum nodded like that mattered. Maren told him about the scholarship, the pregnancy, the impossible math of daycare and tuition. It wasn't a choice, she said. It was survival. Callum's voice was soft. "Survival is still strength." Maren looked up, caught by that. Callum admitted something too, how he had built a successful career and still lived like a man who had forgotten how to be a person outside work. "I think," he said slowly, "you had to grow up too fast. And I never grew up in some places at all." Elsie returned holding a drawing, 2 little buildings side by side, one labeled Mom's Home and the other Callum's Studio. Stick figures smiling between them. Callum studied it like it was a blueprint. "Can I keep this?" Elsie nodded solemnly. "It's yours." Maren watched Callum fold the paper carefully like it mattered. and something inside her eased just a fraction. One Friday, Callum arrived with a different energy, excited, nervous. "I had an idea," he said. Maren didn't look up from her computer. "Please tell me it's not another deadline. It's not for work," he said. Then he looked at Elsie. "Do you want to build something with me?" A real model, your own. Elsie froze like her brain needed a second to believe joy was allowed. "A model like the tiny towns, yes," Callum said. "But this one is yours. You'll design it." Elsie squealed a sound that made Maren's eyes sting. They spread materials on the conference table: cardstock, rulers, safe scissors, washable paint glue. Callum didn't take over. He guided. "What do you want first?" he asked. Elsie bit her lip, thinking hard. A house with 3 windows. And yellow windows. Callum drew while Elsie dictated like a boss. "How many floors?" 3, she declared. "Because 3 feels brave." Maren pretended to work while watching them out of the corner of her eye, heart tight with something like grief. Grief for the version of Elsie who had to be quiet and hungry. On Saturday, Callum texted, "Want to keep building only if you're up for it. Weekend time." His time. Maren almost refused out of habit. Elsie begged with polite desperation. So they went. Callum had bought tiny brushes, extra paint, a small wooden base. Elsie glued windows with intense concentration, tongue sticking out. Callum praised her precision, like she was a real architect. They built a front garden out of green paper grass, a fence, a little tree. When it stood upright, a 3-story house with cheerful windows, Elsie clapped like she'd built a skyscraper. Callum's voice softened. "You have talent." Elsie puffed up with pride. "I do, you do," Callum said. That night, Elsie whispered to Maren in bed, "Is Callum our friend?" Maren stared at the ceiling. "Yes, a special friend." Elsie paused, then asked the question that made Maren's cheeks warm in the dark. "Do you like him?" "Different." Maren exhaled. "Go to sleep, architect." Elsie giggled, satisfied, but the question stayed awake long after Elsie didn't. 2 weeks later, Callum arrived with a box. "I have a surprise," he said. Elsie bounced. "What is it?" "Close your eyes," he told her. Elsie obeyed, trembling with anticipation. Callum set the box on the table, lifted the lid, and pulled back tissue paper like unveiling a treasure. "Open." Elsie gasped. Their model house, but finished like it belonged in a gallery. Cleaner lines, brighter colors, protected on a polished wooden base, and a small metal plaque on the front that read, "Villa Elsie." Elsie touched the plaque like it might disappear. "It has my name." Callum crouched beside her. "Because it's yours. You designed every detail." Elsie threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you." Maren stood, frozen eyes burning, watching her daughter receive something she'd never been able to give, not just a toy, a memory of being cherished. When Elsie ran to place it carefully in her corner room, Maren stepped closer to Callum. "You didn't have to do all that," she said, voice shaking with gratitude and fear. "Time. Effort." Callum searched for words like they were difficult. "I wanted to." Then quieter. "It's one of the best things I've done in a long time." Maren swallowed. "She'll keep this forever." Callum held her gaze. "I hope so." The air between them stretched, too full of unsaid things. Elsie burst back in, excited. "Can I show it to the neighbors?" Maren laughed, breaking the intensity. Carefully. That night, Elsie fell asleep with Villa Elsie on a shelf by her bed, like a nightlight made of love. Maren lay awake thinking, how did a bakery window become this? How did one careful kindness start building something that looked dangerously like a home? The call came on a Tuesday morning. Callum answered casually until the voice introduced itself. Richard Halston. Halston and Partners, London. Maren watched Callum's posture shift, straightening, attention sharpening. Halston and Partners was legendary. Callum listened as Richard described a project in Dubai luxury towers, global press, career-defining prestige, 2-year leadership role, massive compensation. "We need an answer by Friday," Richard said. "Start next month." Callum ended the call with professional calm, but his eyes looked distant. Marin stepped in with a folder. "Everything okay? A firm in London?" Callum said slowly. "Dubai project." Marin forced a smile that felt practiced. "That's huge." "It is," he admitted. For the rest of the day, the studio felt different, like a beautiful room waiting for someone to say goodbye. Marin worked perfectly, because that's what she did when she was scared. But her chest ached. Not because Callum owed her anything, because Elsie loved him, because the office had become safe. And safety was a thing Marin didn't trust. Wednesday afternoon, Elsie asked Callum to help draw a city that touches the sky. Callum sat with her coloring buildings, listening to her rambling story about rooftop gardens and secret libraries. Marin watched them and felt a sick twist of panic. If he left, it wasn't just a job that would vanish. It was everything they'd started to build. Thursday morning, Callum arrived early and walked through the studio alone. He paused by the shelf where Villa Elsie sat like a symbol of what mattered. Then Marin and Elsie arrived hand in hand, Elsie skipping Marin, smiling at something her daughter said. Callum stood at the window watching them enter the building, and you could see the decision trying to form in his chest. Friday afternoon arrived like a verdict. Callum sat at his desk with Richard's email open, contracts, renderings, numbers that could change everything. He closed his eyes. He thought about 2 years on the other side of the world. And then he thought about Elsie's laugh, Marin's quiet competence, shared coffee, shared routine, shared life. He opened his eyes and looked at the studio. This used to be just work, he whispered almost to himself. Then he dialed London. Richard answered upbeat. "Callum, I hope it's good news." Callum's voice was calm. "It's an incredible offer, and I'm grateful." A pause. "But I'm going to decline," Callum said. "I have commitments here I can't leave." Richard sounded genuinely disappointed. "That's a shame," I know, Callum said softly, "but my answer is no." He hung up and waited for regret. None came. Only relief. Marin appeared at the doorway minutes later like she'd sensed the shift in the air. "You seem different," she said cautiously. Callum stood. "I turned down Dubai." Marin blinked. "You... what?" "I turned it down," he repeated. Her voice broke despite her effort. Why? Callum walked toward her, stopping at a respectful distance, close enough to be honest, not close enough to pressure. "Because I realized I already have what I need here," he said. "I don't want to build something that looks impressive while my life feels empty." Marin's eyes shone. "Callum, you and Elsie?" he said, voice quiet but steady. "You changed everything." Marin stepped forward and hugged him before she could think. Callum held her back, careful, sincere, like he knew a hug could mean too much. Elsie appeared confused. "Why are you hugging?" Marin wiped her face, laughing softly through tears. "Because Callum is staying." Elsie's face lit up like sunrise. She threw herself into his arms. Callum crouched, holding her. "I'm staying," he promised. "Right here." Marin watched them and felt hope, real, dangerous, beautiful hope spread through her chest. And for once, she didn't push it away. On Saturday, Callum invited them to lunch at his house. Marin said yes too quickly, then panicked. Callum's home was modern glass and clean lines, beautiful, expensive, quiet. Elsie walked in wide-eyed. "You live here." "Alone, I do," Callum admitted. "It's like a museum," Elsie whispered, then added politely, "A nice museum." Marin noticed the same thing, perfection without warmth. Callum seemed to notice it too, like he was seeing his own life for the first time. Over lunch, pasta, because he remembered Elsie loved it. Elsie chattered about her model house and school stories and imaginary cities. the house filled with sound. Afterward, Elsie stood in the living room, looking around thoughtfully. "You know what this house is?" she asked. Callum smiled. "What?" "It's pretty," she said. But it was empty. Marin's breath caught. She worried Elsie had been rude. Elsie continued, gentle and honest. "Now it has people in it." Callum's expression shifted, like something deep inside him understood. He glanced at Marin. Their eyes met. Not boss and employee, not benefactor and grateful mother. Just two adults realizing the same thing at the same time. A home isn't architecture, it's presence. A week later, Callum brought pizza to Marin's apartment. Elsie played cards on the floor with him, laughing every time she won. Marin washed dishes, watching them through the small kitchen opening, happy and terrified. Callum noticed her quiet. After Elsie went to brush her teeth, he stepped closer. "Is everything okay?" Marin tried to lie. "Yes." Callum waited, patient silence, the kind that makes truth spill out. Marin finally looked at him, eyes shining with fear. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what he asked, gently." "Trust," she whispered. "Believe it lasts. Believe you won't wake up one day and realize we're too much." Callum's voice stayed calm. "Look at me." She did. "I'm not here out of obligation," he said. "I'm here because I want to be." Marin's throat trembled. "But what if you regret turning down Dubai?" "I chose something better," Callum said. "I chose a real life." Marin's voice broke. "Elsie loves you." "And I?" Callum waited. "And I do too," she whispered, like confessing was stepping onto thin ice. Callum touched her face gently, only when she didn't pull away. "I love you too," he said. "And I'm not leaving." Elsie appeared in pajamas, toothbrush in hand, eyes wide. "Are you guys crying?" Marin laughed softly, wiping her cheeks. "Just a little." Elsie walked over and studied them like a tiny judge. "Is Callum going to live with us now?" she asked. Callum crouched to her level. "Do you want me to?" "I do," Elsie said immediately. "Then you can read stories every night." Callum looked at Marin, asking permission without words. Marin nodded, small, terrified, real. Callum's voice softened. "Then we'll find a bigger place. For the three of us. A place that's ours." Elsie's eyes widened. "A room for me, you pick the color," Callum promised. Elsie placed her hands on Callum's cheeks the way she'd seen adults do when they were serious. "I have a dad now," she said. "It's you." Callum froze, then hugged her, tight, eyes shining. Marin knelt beside them, hand on both backs, breathing through tears that felt like relief. The next week, something arrived that didn't look like hope. A white envelope. Official seal. Too formal. Marin opened it at the kitchen counter with hands that suddenly felt cold. Notice of review, family services/benefits compliance. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't an accusation written in screaming letters. It was worse, polite, clinical quiet. A routine audit, a paperwork mismatch, a request for an interview. But Marin's mind did what trauma minds do. It imagined everything breaking. Elsie sat at the table, coloring. Safe, unaware. Marin folded the letter like she could fold the fear away. Callum noticed immediately when she walked into the studio, looking pale. "What's wrong?" he asked. Marin forced her voice steady. "It's just paperwork." Callum didn't push. He just waited with the kind of patience that made lying feel impossible. Marin handed him the letter. Callum read it, then looked up. "This is a compliance interview. It doesn't mean you're guilty of anything." "I know," Marin whispered, voice shaking. "But I've lived a life where paperwork decides if you eat." Callum set the letter down carefully. "Okay. Then we handle it the right way." Marin blinked. "We," Callum nodded. "We." Her eyes filled. "I don't want them thinking you're doing something wrong," Callum finished gently. Then we make it clear, professionally, legally. He didn't say I'll fix it like a hero. He said, we'll be clear like a partner. Callum called a family attorney. He trusted someone calm, ethical, discreet. A meeting was scheduled. Maren brought every document she owned, rent receipts, pay stubs, school records for Elsie, medical paperwork from the fever visit. The lawyer explained it simply. Sometimes a name mismatch, an address change, or an outdated file triggers a review. They want confirmation that the child is safe, that the household details are accurate, that there's no fraud. That's it. Maren's voice came small. But it says investigation. It's standard language, the lawyer reassured. We respond with facts. Callum reached for Maren's hand under the table, not dramatic, not possessive, just present. On the day of the interview, Maren wore her most professional outfit. Elsie wore a clean yellow sweater and carried her small notebook of drawings like armor. Callum came too because he had nothing to hide. At the office, a caseworker greeted them politely. No hostility. No confrontation. Calm questions. How long have you been employed at Sutter Studio? Maren answered. Does your employer provide childcare? Maren explained the side room, the safety, the routine. Is Elsie enrolled in school? Yes. Do you have stable housing? We are looking for a bigger place, Maren admitted honestly. But we are stable. Then the caseworker looked at Callum. And your relationship to the family. Callum's jaw tightened, not from anger, from seriousness. I'm Maren's partner, he said respectfully. And I intend to build a stable household with them legally and responsibly. Maren's breath caught. The caseworker didn't frown. She nodded, writing notes. Thank you for clarity. Then came the moment Maren feared most. Sometimes the caseworker said carefully, children form attachments quickly when circumstances change. We need to ensure boundaries are appropriate and that the child feels safe. Maren's voice trembled. Elsie is safe. Callum spoke softly, measured. Elsie is always treated with dignity. We don't post her online for publicity. We don't put her in adult situations. We keep routines, and everything we do is legal and transparent. The caseworker looked at Elsie. Hi, Elsie. Would you like to show me your drawings? Elsie nodded and opened her notebook like it was a presentation. This is my house, she said. This is my mom. This is Callum. This is my room in the new house we're looking for. It will be yellow. The caseworker smiled. That's a good plan. Maren's throat tightened. She realized something. This wasn't a trap. It was a system trying imperfectly to protect kids. After the interview, the caseworker stood. Thank you for cooperating. Based on what we've seen, we just need updated address confirmation when you move. You'll receive a closure notice soon. Closure notice. Maren almost collapsed with relief. Outside in the cold Seattle air, she breathed like she'd been holding her lungs closed for years. Callum didn't say, "See, I told you." He just asked, "Do you want to go get Elsie a hot chocolate?" Elsie cheered. Maren looked at Callum and whispered, "Thank you for not letting me face that alone." Callum's voice was low, steady. "You never have to again." The closure notice didn't arrive like a miracle. It arrived like anything official always did, quietly in a plain envelope that looked too thin to carry that much power. Maren held it in both hands at the kitchen counter of their new apartment, still half unpacked, still smelling like fresh paint and cardboard. Elsie's yellow room was 2 doors down the door, already decorated with a crayon sign that read, Elsie's Studio, in uneven, proud letters. Maren stared at the envelope until her eyes blurred. Callum noticed without asking. He walked over, not rushing her, not hovering, just placing himself beside her like a steady wall in a storm. "Do you want me to open it?" he asked softly. Maren shook her head. "No, I need to do it." Her fingers slid under the flap, paper whispered. Her heart thudded like it was trying to run away. Notice of closure compliance review complete, no further action required at this time. Update address and household documentation within 30 days. Maren read it twice. Then a third time, like the words might change if she blinked wrong. Callum exhaled slow relief. Okay, he said. That's good. Maren's breath hitched, the kind that comes right before tears. She pressed the paper to her chest, like it could stop her shaking. It's over, she whispered, but her voice didn't sound convinced. It's actually over. From down the hall, Elsie's feet padded closer. She appeared in the doorway holding Villa Elsie carefully with both hands like a crown made of fragile wood and paint. Her blonde hair was still damp from a bath, and her cheeks were pink from warmth. Mom, Elsie asked, eyes flicking between them. Are we okay? Maren knelt so fast her knees didn't have time to complain. We're okay, she said, and this time she let the words be real. We're safe. Elsie nodded, serious like a tiny grown-up. Then she held up the model house. Where should this go? Callum crouched too level with her. In a place where you can see it every day, he said. A place that reminds you what you made. Elsie considered the living room, the couch still wrapped in plastic, the bookshelf half-built, the window, letting in that soft Seattle winter light. Then she pointed like an architect presenting her vision. There, she declared. On the shelf. So it can watch us, Callum smiled. Perfect. Maren stood slowly, letter still trembling in her hand. Relief didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like her muscles unclenching one by one after years of bracing. The truth was, the legal review had been polite, procedural, and calm, exactly what responsible systems should be. But her body didn't know the difference between routine and danger, not after living so long in the fragile space between rent and groceries, between hope and a shut door. Callum took the closure letter gently, not to steal it, just to help her carry it. We'll update everything, he said. Lease address, school forms, insurance. We do it clean. We do it right. Maren nodded. I don't want anyone to think they won't, Callum said, cutting off the fear before it could grow teeth. Because we're not doing anything wrong. We're building stability. The word building landed differently now. Elsie waddled toward the shelf, carefully placing Villa Elsie on the middle level. She stepped back, hands on hips, admiring her work like a proud designer. It looks like home, she announced. Maren's throat tightened. She walked to the bookshelf and touched the edge of the model base, the plaque gleaming softly. Villa Elsie. A tiny sign that said, You belong. You matter. Someone saw you. Callum's voice came low behind her. You did the hardest part already, he said. You kept her safe when it was just you. Maren turned, eyes shining. And now Callum didn't make grand speeches. He simply reached for her hand. Now it's us, he said. We keep choosing that. Elsie spun around. Family meeting, she declared like she'd heard the phrase in a cartoon. We need a calendar. Maren blinked through tears and laughed, small, shocked laughter that felt like air returning to her lungs. Okay, she said. Family meeting. Callum nodded solemnly, playing along. We absolutely need a calendar. And in that moment, the fear didn't vanish, but it finally stopped being the loudest thing in the room. The calendar became their first ritual, something so ordinary it felt revolutionary. Callum taped it to the kitchen wall with careful precision, smoothing the corners as if he were mounting a blueprint. A big monthly grid, clean lines, plenty of room for color. Elsie brought her yellow markers like sacred tools, and Maren stood back with a mug of coffee, watching the scene like she was watching a miracle pretend to be normal. Rule number 1, Elsie said, tapping the paper like a teacher, we write fun first. Callum's brows lifted. An excellent policy. Maren smiled. We should probably write school first. Elsie made a dramatic sigh. Fine, school. But then fun. They started with the basics, Elsie's school schedule, Maren's work hours, grocery day, laundry day. Callum wrote neatly, the letters crisp and measured like he couldn't help turning life into organized lines. Marin watched him and felt the familiar panic try to rise. This won't last. Don't get used to it. But then Elsie leaned her small shoulder against Callum's arm, completely unafraid, and the panic softened into something else. Gratitude. And a new kind of tension, hope, trying to learn how to breathe. Okay, Callum said, stepping back to inspect the calendar like a finished design. Now we plan the fun. Elsie's eyes sparkled. Saturday bakery. Marin froze just slightly. The bakery was their origin story, their before and after. Returning felt like touching a scar to prove it healed. Callum noticed her hesitation and didn't force it. He asked softly. Too much? Marin swallowed. No, she said, surprising herself. It's important. So Saturday became bakery morning in bright yellow letters with a tiny cake doodle beside it that Elsie insisted on drawing herself. Then came another square library because Elsie loved books and Callum had an entire room of them. Another park because Elsie deserved to run without counting minutes. Another movie night, and Elsie wrote it in all caps like it was a national holiday. When the calendar was done, Elsie nodded like she'd approved a contract. Okay, she said. Now we need rules. Marin raised an eyebrow. Rules. Elsie held up one finger. Rule 1, no one leaves without saying goodbye. Callum's expression softened. Agreed. Elsie held up a second finger. Rule 2, if someone is sad, we don't pretend. Marin's chest tightened because her daughter had learned that rule the hard way by watching Marin pretend too often. Callum nodded slowly. That's a good rule. Elsie held up a third finger. Rule 3, we eat. Always. Even if it's small. Even if it's soup. Marin's eyes burned. She looked away quickly, pretending she needed to rinse her mug. Callum didn't call attention to her tears. He just walked to the fridge and checked it full enough now to feel like a promise. Fruit. Yogurt. Soup. Bread. Real groceries that didn't disappear the moment you looked at them. He shut the door and spoke quietly behind her. You did this, he said. You got her here. Marin turned, shaking her head. No, I survived. That's all. Callum's gaze held steady. Surviving with love is more than all. Elsie bounced between them, suddenly holding her marker like a microphone. Question, she said. Is Callum officially my... Dad? Marin's heart stuttered. Callum didn't flinch or rush. He crouched to Elsie's level voice, gentle. What do you want me to be? Elsie thought hard, like this was serious architecture. I want you to be the person who stays, she said simply. The person who comes back. Callum's throat worked. Then I'm that he promised. I'm staying. I'm coming back. Every day I can. Elsie nodded, satisfied. Marin felt the last corner of her fear shift, still there but smaller, pushed back by something sturdier: consistency, responsibility, choice. Callum stood and looked at Marin. You okay? Marin took a slow breath, then nodded. I'm learning, she said. Callum smiled, quiet and real. Me too. Elsie slapped the calendar lightly like a judge. Meeting adjourned, she announced. Now, hot chocolate. Marin laughed through her tears. Yes, hot chocolate. Callum reached for mugs. We have cocoa, he said, as if that alone proved the world could be kind. And for that moment, in that ordinary kitchen with a bright yellow calendar on the wall, Marin let herself believe that safety could be practiced one square at a time. Saturday morning in Seattle arrived, soft and silver rain on the sidewalks, a pale winter sun trying its best. Marin held Elsie's hand as they walked, and the simple pressure of those small fingers felt like proof that life could change without warning and without punishment. The bakery was there, exactly where it had always been. Same window, same glow, same warm, impossible smell, fresh bread, butter, coffee spilling into the street like an invitation. Elsie stopped, eyes wide, not with hunger this time, but with memory. She leaned closer to the glass as if she could see the past in the reflection. This is where we met you, she said, looking up at Callum. Callum's throat tightened. It is, he answered, calm but deep. This is where everything started. Marin's chest tightened too, an old reflex, but it didn't turn into panic. It turned into something gentler. Gratitude. The kind that doesn't beg. The kind that stands. They pushed open the door together. Warmth wrapped around them like a blanket. The bell chimed. A worker behind the counter smiled. No one stared. No one asked questions. They were just a family walking into a bakery on a weekend morning. Elsie led them to the same window table, as if it belonged to them now. Marin sat down, smoothing Elsie's hair back, noticing how her daughter moved with the confidence of a child who no longer had to be easy. Callum sat across from them and watched the two of them like he still couldn't believe he was allowed to have this. "What do you want today, architect?" he asked Elsie with a grin. Elsie sat up straight, serious as a professional. Chocolate cake, and warm bread, and milk. Marin started to say, "That's a lot out of habit." Callum met her eyes, gentle. "It's okay," he said quietly, and the words didn't feel like charity. They felt like permission to live. When the food arrived, Elsie took her first bite of cake and closed her eyes in exaggerated happiness. This is still the best place, she declared, mouth full, proud of herself. Marin laughed an honest laugh, not the careful kind, and Callum's smile softened like sunlight finally landing. Elsie wiped her mouth with a napkin and looked between them, blue eyes bright. "We're really a family, right?" Marin's breath caught old fear trying to rise, then she felt Callum's hand reach across the table, steady and warm. Not urgent, not demanding, just there. "Yes," Marin said, voice quiet but sure. "We're a family," Callum nodded. "A family we built." Elsie lifted her fork like a tiny toast, brick by brick. Callum laughed, eyes shining. Exactly. Outside, the rain kept falling like it always had. But inside the bakery at that window table, the world felt different, simple, safe, and finally home. Did this story move you? Share your thoughts in the comments and rate this story from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you don't miss other heartwarming stories. Click on the last screen to see the next emotional chapter waiting for you. See you in the next story.